Hello everybody and welcome to this lecture in the series of the Premium Skills Institute on preparing for the breeding season. My name is Marijke Beltman and this lecture covers synchronization of oestrus in cows. Before we go into the how of synchronization, first a bit on why would we synchronize. Basically, synchronization reduces the problems of heat detection and specifically, in this case, the labor problems. Because with less time for routine work and less labor on farms, we want to make sure that we spend our time efficiently. And if you synchronize animals, you only have to dedicate a specific amount of time to heat detection. We have shorter and less intense heats in a lot of cows, so if you have more animals in heat at the same time by synchronization, you have more chance of picking them up. You can shorten the breeding season and get more compact calving, or you can advance the breeding season for the late calvers and bring them in closer. It allows you to use AIs in heifers that are housed away from the home farm. And please note that there is a subtle difference between oestrus synchronization and induction of non-cycling and oestrus. Important factors to take into account before you start any synchronization program is, of course, the nutrition and body condition score of the cows that you're going to synchronize, postpartum interval, the season, semen quality and semen type used, a bit more about that later in this lecture, and early and accurate pregnancy diagnosis so that any open cows can be resynchronized. The basic principle of synchronization rests on two things. One of them is the shortening of the lifespan of any present corpus luteum, as that removes the negative feedback of progesterone on the LH pulse frequency and LH surge. And the second one is that you want to have a healthy dominant follicle for ovulation in a predictable 24-hour period after treatment. What methods do we have available to us? Prostaglandin, which will cause luteolysis, so has a direct effect on the CL. Progesterone, or any other synthetic progestogen that works as an endogenous CL, or you can, of course, combine both of them. Let's start with prostaglandin only. In order for this to be effective, you have to have a corpus luteum that is 5 to 16 days old. If you use only a single injection, there is a spread of onset in oestrus related to the stages of the cycle and the stages of the development of the dominant follicle you are in. If you're injecting or hitting the CL on day 6 or 7 or day 14, 15, you have precise onset, and if there is day 9, 13, you have more of a spread. That is the reason why we tend to go for double injections, because it reduces this spread. The reason for the spread becomes more clear if you look at these two graphs. Depending on where the animal is in the cycle, and that depends, of course, if there is a 2-wave or a 3-wave cycle, is depending on how quick you get your response. If there is a dominant follicle ready to go, you will have a short window between the injection and oestrus. If you have a follicular wave that has just gone into the atresia stages and the new wave stages still have to emerge, it will take that little bit longer. What you see here is a injection on day 8 of a cycle in a 3-wave cycle, so 3 follicular waves, and this will lead to 2 days to oestrus because of the fact that there is already a follicle there ready to go, as you can see on the right ovary. If you compare that previous animal to this animal here, we have injection on day 10, but as you can see, the large follicle on the left ovary is actually on its way down or on its way to atresia regression. That means that you're relying on the tiny follicles on the right ovary to emerge, and they take a couple of days to grow. So this is an animal with a 2-wave cycle, and this animal after this injection will take that bit longer because there's no follicle ready to go. To understand the response and how the two intervals work, it basically kind of takes a bit of mapping of where animals are. So an animal on day 0 to 4 of the cycle, the first injection, will not respond because the CL is refractory. However, 11 days later, this animal has a CL that is 11 to 15 days old and will respond. The animal that is on day 5 to 16 of the cycle will respond and will come in heat 2 to 5 days later after the first injection. That means that there is a new CL formed, which will be on day 6 to 9 at the stage of the second cycle, which means that it also is not refractory and will respond at that stage. The animal that is on day 16 to 21 of the cycle will naturally come in heat 1 to 5 days later, which also means that this one is at the stage of the second injection at day 6 to 10 and will respond. So as you can see, the second PG will have a response that is much narrower than the spread you got to the first response. If you summarize that in methods and the use of prostaglandin, in general, we say 2 injections 11 days apart works really well for 6-week heifers, and the timing of AI can be fixed time or at detected estrus. If you inject and breed all of those in estrus and then re-inject those that didn't come in heat, that will save you a little bit of money because you're basically breeding everything that comes in heat after the first injection. You can do that in both cows and heifers, and you breed at heat detected estrus. If you are basically there scanning or palpating and you detect a CL and then inject, again, that will respond. After a known heat date, so if there's either colors or aids or the animal has been seen, then of course you can time your injection and the animal will respond really well. If you want to bring in a bit of follicular wave synchrony before the use of prostaglandin, you can add GnRH to your prostaglandin protocol, and this is also known as the off-sync protocol. What you do then is you include 2 injections of GnRH and you have 1 injection of prostaglandin. The first injection of GnRH synchronizes the new wave, and the second injection controls the time of ovulation. Prostaglandin, as always, causes CL regression, and AI can be fixed time 15 to 18 hours post the second injection. Of course, this means that GnRH needs to work, which means that you have to be, for it to work, in the LH-dependent phase of the cycle. So outside of FSH in the LH-dependent phase, because then GnRH, the follicles will respond to GnRH. The GnRH PG protocol is very effective if a cow has a healthy dominant follicle at the start. If this dominant follicle is around 10 millimeters or bigger, then GnRH will work. That means that it's in that LH dominant phase, and the percentage of the total wave where the follicles are greater than 10 millimeters is key. So 10 millimeter follicle versus multiple 10 millimeter follicles. You have longer dominance of follicles in 2-wave cycles, dairy cows and high yielders, and shorter dominance in heifers. They have 3-wave cycles and in anestrus. Non-responding cows to the first GnRH, some come back in estrus before day 7. So of course, then we went totally hormone happy and did a pre-sync off-sync where we went in with 2 injections of prostaglandin and then GnRH, PG, GnRH, and a double off-sync for GnRH, PG, GnRH, GnRH, PG, GnRH. If you then consider what the results, if you do pre-sync, off-sync, and double off versus double off-sync, for double off-sync, so the double GnRH, PG, GnRH, you get a higher percentage of pregnancy than you go for the pre-sync, off-sync, so the prostaglandin before the GnRH protocol. This was a substantial amount of cows that this these numbers come from. So I'd be quite happy to stand over those results. If you look at then the effect of parity, primipares versus multipares, the whole idea is that the double upsync in the primipares has a better response than in the multipares cows, and that is of course because these animals have no underlying diseases. Of course, we can then add the use of progesterone to the use of prostaglandin to control estrus, so combined protocol progesterone with prostaglandin. The progesterone protocols were quite long. This gave excellent synchronization of estrus, but very low fertility. So everybody was then wondering, why is this happening? Because everybody was very happy about the fact that all the animals came in heat at the same time due to the long-term negative feedback that the progesterone was inducing. But the low fertility had a combination of reasons: poor fertilization, increased embryo death, hormonal imbalance, and predominantly it was due to the induction of persistent dominant follicles that then led to aged oocytes. We now know that short duration is the key to success. Basically, the reason for this is that any progesterone device will have subluteal progesterone concentrations after 3 to 4 days after they're been put in place. This subluteal progesterone blocks estrus and ovulation, but increases LH pulse frequency. That leads to the formation of a persistent dominant follicle, an aged oocyte, and it holds the animal at the onset of the follicular phase. So basically, the whole thing is that progesterone, you have your negative feedback on GnRH, you suppress the LH pulse frequency, you prevent ovulation, but you don't want it to be too long and you don't want that negative effect. It doesn't suppress FSH, so it doesn't stop or synchronize follicular wave. Subluteal progesterone, as I said, gives you some suppression, but the dominant follicle persists and you get your aged oocyte. 14 days, still longer, shorter than the 21, but still long. Very good synchrony, poor ovulation synchrony. What happens when you have a progesterone device? In a normal luteal phase, progesterone causes dominant follicle turnover. If you then have an exogenous progesterone source and the CL, the endogenous CL is already gone, this prolongs dominance of the actual follicle, and that has a detrimental effect on the oocyte quality, because what has happened that the oocyte resumes meiosis and gets aged and will therefore be none or less fertile. So 12-day treatment used to work very well, but that was when we still had estradiol. Estradiol led to new wave emergence and optimum fertility of the follicle in that new wave. Without estradiol, we have to shorten it because we don't want aged oocyte. Where does the prostaglandin come in? The endogenous progesterone source needs to be removed in order for all the negative feedback on GnRH to be removed. Prostaglandin is the only option for this that we have. You basically give that 1 day, ideally, before the removal of the progesterone device, and the pregnancy rates will increase at this stage. Estrus fund can decrease, but in general, this gives you quite a good response. Can you then add in GnRH? Of course you can. And that's the GnRH addition will give you a synchronization of the follicular wave. So GnRH at the start will cause LH relief, luteinizes or ovulates the dominant follicle. That means no dominant follicle that persists, so no aged oocyte. Get a new wave and a new dominant follicle. And the use of prostaglandin is necessary then, of course, if you've had a ovulation caused by GnRH, because you want to get rid of that endogenous progesterone source. So this is what we call the kind of gold star treatment. GnRH up front, 7, 8, or 9 days of progesterone with prostaglandin the day before removal. It gives you good synchrony and normal fertility. If you then have even more hormones available, or you want to have even a better effect or more control, you can give GnRH or ECG after removal of the progesterone device. This will stimulate follicular growth and ovulation, and will therefore give you an even better response potentially. Of course, there is now a lot of talk about a shorter sync, a 5-day sync protocol in heifers. And there's two options for this. One is with GnRH up front, a progesterone device for 5 days, and prostaglandin injection on day 5 and 6 of the protocol. A limitation of this protocol is that the CL that is formed after the GnRH injection at the start of the treatment may not have enough receptors to respond to the prostaglandin. This is why you give 2 injections at the end of a 5-day protocol, but it still might not lead to enough luteolysis. Can you leave out the GnRH? Yes. You still end up with giving 2 prostaglandin injections. The non-GnRH means that if there's a dominant follicle there, you're extending the dominance of it, and that means that there is still a prolonged dominance and still an aged oocyte. So basically, while it is options, the ultimate result, there is actually no evidence for either option 1 or option 2 that they have a better result than a 7-day protocol. Timed AI versus natural heat. Of course, if you go in at one specific time, any natural spread will affect the actually success rate. So timed AI, you end up with in around 40%. Some studies in the States report even less. Natural heat is much higher. So it's one of those things, if you, in these cases, advise a synchronization protocol to a client, if they're investing all that money, they might as well heat detect because it gives them a better alternative. Just want to share a few slides with you about a dairy trial that was run a couple of years ago where they gave a progesterone device with GnRH up front and then either prostaglandin, GnRH and AI, or prostaglandin and ECG and GnRH and AI. So it's kind of a progesterone, off-sync progesterone co-sync protocol or a co-sync protocol with ECG. Did it make a difference? Was there a better or a worse performance? If you look at the conception rate to first AI, of course, submission rates in a synchronization protocol go to 100% because you submit everything. If you go to conception rate for first AI, there was actually no difference. If you take season into account, there is a slight increase, a better performance if you use any of the hormone protocols for the 21-day pregnancy rate, the 42-day pregnancy rate, and even of the final day pregnancy rate. So within season, it could be worth it. This is a lot of hormone use and a lot of cost though, so I sometimes wonder, and definitely synchronization does not take away bad management. That's one thing I always keep reminding people of. They don't like it though. If you look at the survival analysis of all the cows that were on this trial, you see that everything, of course, ends up in the same, but you see that the off-sync and the ECG off-sync the mating start days to conception in the foal was shortened by the use of hormones. Something else I want you to consider when thinking about synchronizing animals. Usually we use synchronization as a blanket protocol to all cows. We don't really look at underlying physiological state or concurrent diseases. So just some more research and results to share with you. And this is responses to a progesterone protocol for cows with different type of underlying conditions, from uterine infection, negative energy balance, lameness, higher somatic cell count, anovulatory oestrus, and healthy cows. So responders changed in calf rate changed as well when there was concurrent diseases. So if you look at this of the healthy animals, nearly half of the animals that responded went in calf. Of the ones in oestrus, less than that. Lame animals, not a great response. High somatic cell count, not a great response. Negative energy balance, also a reduced response. Uterine infection, also a reduced response. So that shows you that if you use blanket treatment, some animals will not respond very favorable, and it has nothing to do with the treatment, but with the underlying conditions in these animals. So the probability of the animal responding is very much in relation to the number of physiological disease classification. And of course, animals that have negative energy balance tend to also have something else. So usually it's not, they don't just have one disease, they have more than one. I want to finish up with a little bit on sex semen and synchronization in relation to sex semen. Why do we use sex semen? You basically have an increased number of female calves, because you can have 90% chance that you have only one gender. You have always a few outliers. The lab time of the semen processing in order for it to be sexed means that the sperm cells are exposed to room temperature for longer than with conventional semen, which increases sperm cell damage. You also deal with a lower number of sperm cells per insemination dosage, and the net result of all these things means that insemination needs to be closer to the time of ovulation, which is where synchronization comes in. Deep intrauterine insemination is beneficial. Heifers tend to respond better than cows due to the fact that they have no underlying other conditions, and problem cows are definitely not your candidate for the use of sex semen. So if you want to do it in cows, avoid cows with any reproductive problems. You give a 8-day progesterone synchronization, GnRH up front, prostaglandin on day 7, and then GnRH at 30 to 40 hours after that injection. You then can do fixed IMAI 16 to 22 hours post GnRH. 16 hours will give you a 49% pregnancy rate, 22 hours at 51% pregnancy rate. That is still more than 10% or around 10% lower than if you have conventional semen. If you use it in heifers, you have two options. Spontaneous heats, and then in that case you need to stick with the AM/PM rule so that your semen is inseminated as close to the time of ovulation as possible due to the lesser viability of the semen and the lower concentration. And it does require accurate determination of estrus onset, so it does require very intense heat detection monitoring. It means literally those that are coming in heat in the morning up to 12 o'clock, they have to be inseminated in the evening. Those that are coming in heat from 12 o'clock until midnight, they have to be inseminated the next morning. A lot of work, so most people will use it with synchronization. If you use 2 prostaglandin injections 11 days apart, you again want to go to the use of sex semen with an AM/PM rule. Don't attempt fixed time AI because the timing to ovulation is just too variable. However, of course, we have our old friend progesterone. If you use progesterone device, you have two options. You can either doing the AM/PM rule, or you do similar to cows. You give GnRH 30 to 40 hours post the prostaglandin injection, and then use fixed time AI. You need to keep your eye on the price when using sexed semen, because the use of frozen thawed sexed semen needs strict timing of insemination. That means healthy only cows, fertile only cows, low capid difficulty, use the AM/PM rules. Heifers, AM/PM for spontaneous heat. With synchronization, timings are more critical than if you use conventional semen, and the whole idea needs to be that you get the insemination as close to the time of ovulation as possible. There is no convincing evidence here either that a shorter synchronization protocol with progesterone, so less than 7 days, is actually more beneficial for these cases either.